You know, something that's become a bit of a hobby for people now is probably modifying Joy-Con controllers on the Switch, or even just the entire shell itself. It's something you see pop up all the time online. Change the plastic shells out, add a D-pad if you want, put it back together, and you have a customized Joy-Con controller that Nintendo will probably never create because we want every single color out there, right? Well, what if we go a little further? Today, we're actually going to take a look at the idea of not only changing out the shell for different Joy-Con controllers, but also the LEDs on the sides. See, if you look at the side, when you put one together, it's still green, of course, because that's just the color of the LEDs. But what if you could change them to pretty much any color you want, even have each one be a different color? Oh, we'll take a shot at that today. And you know it's a good day when the soldering iron is out, and that's what we're gonna try to do. So first, let's talk about what you're gonna need. Of course, you'll need the tools to open up your Switch Joy-Con controllers, a tri-wing screwdriver, so the one with like the 3-tip for opening this or your Switch or other Nintendo devices that seem to use that for whatever reason. Phillips head, screwdriver, and you'll need soldering equipment. So an iron of some kind, most likely a magnifying glass because we're going to be working with small LEDs and some solder. I would recommend some sort of paste flux, but I guess any kind of rosin core solder should be able to at least give you what you need for just having your solder stick well. You're also going to need some LEDs, of course, to replace the ones that are currently in the Switch Joy-Con, and fortunately, they're pretty easy to get. They're on Amazon, they're prime shipped, and you get a whole pack of them for like 10 or 15 bucks. It's not crazy expensive, and they'll last you quite a while. You'll need 4 for each Joy-Con, of course, because there's 4 LEDs, so 8 total if you want to do a pair, but a lot of times you'll get like a lot, like 50. So you'd be good for a while, and you can mix and match them. The nice thing about these is that because they're these surface mount diode type LEDs, you don't need to add anything else. You're literally replacing the LED that's on there currently. You're popping that one off and putting the new one on. So fortunately, we don't have to deal with like resistors or any of that to make these work. So what we're going to go with today is we're going to try adding a white shell to a pair of gray Joy-Con controllers. We're going to change the LEDs out for blue, and I think when it's all done, it'll look pretty good overall. It'll have the nice black contrasting buttons and the different shoulder buttons and triggers here, and then the blue LEDs on the side. Now, what we're looking at here is the railing with the buttons that you may recognize, SL, SR, the ones that are on the top here. So we're looking essentially at this part of the Joy-Con where those LEDs are. And the good thing about these LEDs is they're pretty simple to change out. We do have kind of an arrow here to tell us which way it's set up to go, as these are surface mount diode LEDs as they're described on their Amazon page. And they come in like these white bags, essentially, and they have little dots on them to tell you like what colors they are, but it's like a long row of LEDs. So you do get quite a few of them for a pretty good price, I would say, on Amazon. And the pack that I linked down below has several packs. So I also ended up with green, white, yellow, and a red. Kind of some of the colors I showed off there. Now, I'm going to recase or reshell these Joy-Cons to all white, so I figure we'll make these all blue. And this is just an example, kind of a railing I had set out here. I'm going to pull the ones from, of course, the Joy-Cons that I'm going to be changing out and reshelling, but this way you can kind of see what we're looking at here. Now, the LEDs are very small, so you're going to want to be in a pretty good open area, so you have a large surface space for your table, so if you end up dropping one, it doesn't go just falling to the floor. You're probably not going to find it very easily at that point. But looking at this, we do have little arrows, and the idea of the arrows is to tell you which way that these different LEDs go, and they are specifically set up to go one way. Now, on the bottom of these LEDs, the easiest way I can see these is they do have kind of green markings on the bottom, and it's supposed to be pointing in the direction of this arrow here. Now, if you look at different diagrams, for example, of LEDs, they'll kind of give you an idea as to how you're supposed to set these up, and you're dealing with pretty small parts, so a magnifying glass may help. Generally, I just kind of take note of the orientation of the arrow, which is usually next to each one of these, at which time I can kind of figure out how the LED is supposed to sit on there. Now, what I'm going to do to change these out, just get a little bit of flux on the different LEDs. You don't need a ton because there's not a lot of solder here to work with anyway. And the idea there is just help it flow. But these LEDs, of course, are going to be replaced anyway, so they're not super important. We're just going to heat them up and literally just pick them off of here. It's pretty straightforward. I recommend adding a little bit of solder to either pad. A lot of times, because people don't care about these old LEDs, they'll just set their soldering iron next to it and just kind of push it off of there. These LEDs are pretty fragile, so keep that in mind when you go to put the new ones back. You don't necessarily want to just touch the whole thing with your soldering iron, but because we don't care about these ones and we're just trying to remove them, it does make it a bit easier. Okay, so all the LEDs have been removed, and I went ahead and tinned each one too, just with some fresh solder to help set these down. I have a couple of blue LEDs here that we're gonna drop on here, and this part should be pretty easy. Using like a pair of small tweezers, you can pretty much just hold the LED to it and just kind of tap each side, and it should drop into place without too much issue. So here is our LED that we're gonna be replacing it with. It has that little green kind of line underneath there, and on one, it's me kind of hard to see, but on one side, it's kind of pointing. That's the way we want to put it with the arrow. Again, if you look up online, there are several kind of diagrams that show the orientation of this, and it's pretty hard to see, and that's pretty much why I recommend that you use a magnifying glass of some kind. But I'm gonna go ahead and sit this one down, starting on the left side. Okay, so LED number 1 is now down. I'm gonna go ahead and put the other 3 down here, and we should be good to go. Okay, and there we have one of the strips done. Now, I want to comment very quickly on these LEDs. Most likely, you don't have like a hot air machine that is very controllable at home with like some low melt solder or anything like that. So you're going to do the best you can connecting both points at once with something this small. So I do want to at least say these don't have to be perfectly aligned. In fact, this one here is a little off. I could probably fix that up a little bit, but as long as these points on either side are connected well enough, it should work fine. And you're not going to see any of this when it's closed up. Keep in mind it has a pretty large gap where these shine into, so you should get a pretty good effect no matter what. The biggest thing you want to make sure of is that you have a solid connection on either end, not necessarily this thing is like perfectly dead on straight, all right? So there is some leeway if it doesn't look perfect. So now the plan is to do another one and then take apart those Joy-Con controllers, reshell them with white, and add some nice blue LEDs to them. I'm also going to go ahead and clean up all of this extra flux that's left over here. Some alcohol and a nice brush should work really well to clean that up. All right, there we go. You know what? The thing I like about these shells, kind of the matte shells, is they feel much more stock than those clear ones. You know the ones I'm talking about where you see them all over the place, where you'll have like clear purple or like jungle green kind of that mimics the Nintendo 64 transparent. These ones, on the other hand, because they are like kind of the more matte, solid plastic, feel a lot better, and I think just look even a bit better overall, mostly because it's way closer to what Nintendo does with theirs, and it doesn't look, I guess, I don't want to say off-brand, but definitely not first-party like those transparent shells do, and I think they just overall feel a bit better in the hand. And you know what? I think these go very, very well with the Switch. I like the idea of having different colored LEDs on the side of the Joy-Con there. I think that adds a nice touch to customize it overall. And you know what? It's not too bad to do. I will say, if you're not comfortable with soldering, this will probably be a frustrating project for you, all right? If you have some experience with soldering and you want to try something that's a little harder, but that's not like over the top, crazy difficult, this is probably a fun project to take a shot at because there's not too much to do outside of soldering a point on either side of those LEDs. It's more or less lining them up and getting them to be, I would say, acceptable, again, not perfect, so that they do light up and work. And of course, having the nice touch of changing the Joy-Cons to show up as white in the system itself, I think just overall adds the finishing touch to it. A fun project, yes, and you can do this with all types of color combinations. The LED pack that I linked down below has several different ones. In one of the different ribbons, I actually added 4 different colors just to see how they all looked, and they all looked pretty good, I would say. So you could do like a red or a yellow LED on the side and play around with it. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. This fun little project where you can kind of take your Joy-Con customization to the next level. Make sure you guys like the video on the way out if you enjoyed it. Dislike it if not. And I'll see you guys next time.